Hello Geet, how are you? Today we are going to read an article written by Shoumitro Chatterjee, who is the Assistant Professor of International Economics at John Hopkins University. He wrote this article in the 4th April 2025's Indian Express, which is titled as How to Trump Tariffs. We will now go through the article line by line, underline some important facts or circle them, try to understand what is written in the article, read it very properly, and then we will explain it once again on the screen. Best wishes for that. How to trump tariffs. In an uncertain trade landscape, global firms will seek predictability and openness, and India can be a safe haven. US President Donald Trump has announced sweeping reciprocal tariffs on all trading partners in addition to the existing tariffs on steel and aluminium. The stated goals are reshore manufacturing, especially of cars and electronics and chips, and secondly, to reduce the bilateral trade deficit. Whether those aims can be met remains uncertain, but the two things are quite clear. So from this paragraph, what we understood is this, that Donald Trump administration has levied reciprocal tariffs on every trading partner. They have spared none, even their closest allies like European Union and others, with two important objectives in mind. Firstly, to reshore the manufacturing process, especially of cars, electronics and chips, and the second, to reduce the bilateral trade deficit. The writer says that he is uncertain whether these aims will be met or not, but the targets and the aims are clearly in front of us. The two things that are clear are as follows. Firstly, this is a seismic shock to the global trade order. The scale of tariffs is unprecedented, by some estimates greater than those under the infamous Smoot-Hawley legislation. We'll have to understand what is this Smoot-Hawley legislation. A baseline tariff of 10% applies to all the countries, with higher rates for nations running trade surplus with the US. China is the primary target, which faces a 54% tariff. 34% is newly announced, while the 20% is already existing. Surprisingly, even US close allies like the European Union, Japan, South Korea and Vietnam have not been spared. So this is a point to be noted. Despite the fact that US has free trade agreements, FTAs, with the latter three, specifically European Union, Japan and South Korea, these partners will face tariffs of 20% or more, justified by the US on the grounds of alleged currency manipulation and non-tariff barriers. We have to understand what is this. The US government have justified the levying of 20% tariffs on these friendly nations on the grounds of alleged currency manipulation. This means that they must be doing some currency manipulation, and secondly, due to non-tariff barriers. What does non-tariff barrier mean? We'll have to understand that, and then we will move forward. The tariffs are broad and indiscriminate, applied across products rather than sector-specific lines. This is also an important factor. They are applied on all products. They are not sector-specific. This new regime will likely shrink global trade opportunities as the substantial cost and price increases, dampening demand. This new regime of Donald Trump will likely shrink, or they will reduce the global trade opportunities as the costs will increase substantially and the increase in prices will dampen the demand. Nice. Shrink global trade opportunities, the substantial cost and price increases, dampen demand. Secondly, we saw the first thing which was very clear to us, and now we will move forward to the second. Secondly, we now face a deep trade policy uncertainty. So there is an uncertainty about a trade policy. The announcement lacked clarity on key details. Okay. For instance, the US has cited implied protection levels that far exceed applied MFN, that is most favored nation rates. India's most favored nation rate is 17%, but the US claims India's overall protection is 52% due to non-tariff barriers. Moreover, it's unclear if the tariffs are dynamic or not. If India reduces its own tariffs, will the US reciprocate? That's a question mark. Finally, retaliatory measures by other countries would spiral into a full-blown trade war or set in motion a protracted process of negotiation and bargaining, leaving the trade regime fundamentally unstable. Decision making for firms and governments will be extremely difficult. Although we didn't understand the first part of this paragraph, the second part is very clear and precise. What if India lowers its tariffs? Will the US government reciprocate? This is a question mark. This is a clear thing. Secondly, if other countries follow the same retaliatory measures, then this trade war will go into a spiral. Will spiral down into a full-blown trade war. Either it will set in motion a protracted process of negotiation and bargaining, or it may lead to geopolitical war as well. This is not explicitly mentioned here, but things can go in that way as well, particularly leaving the trade regime fundamentally unstable. The overall trade regime of the world will be unstable, and decision making for a firm, that is for a company or for governments, will be extremely difficult in these times. What we didn't understand is what is implied protection and MFN 17% for India and 52% protection overall for India, and if they are going to reduce it or not. Let's come back to it later. Okay, so first paragraph is clear, second is clear, first part of third paragraph is unclear, while the rest is clear to us. Let's move now forward. All that said, India may have gained a window of opportunity. India's relative advantage stems from the fact that the reciprocal tariffs it faces are lower than those imposed on many of its competitors. Consider two sectors. Firstly, low skilled goods like apparel and footwear, and secondly, higher tech products like electronics. That's true. The reciprocal tariffs India faces is lower than its competitors. Firstly, the low skilled goods such as apparel and footwear, and secondly, higher tech products like electronics. Let's start with apparel. These are not products that US is likely to reshore because American wages are too high to be globally competitive. Here, India has an edge. Nice. Tariffs on export to the US will be 27% for India, 54% for China, 46% for Vietnam, 37% for Bangladesh, and 32% for Indonesia. As long as US continues to import apparel, Indian exporters will experience a competitive advantage. This will be true for other unskilled labor intensive exports as well. This will be also true for other unskilled labor intensive exports. Secondly, in electronics, the picture is more nuanced. US aims to reshore this sector. It aims to do so, and the political will to do so is also strong. But India is still very well positioned. Why? Because among the key exporters, Vietnam, Thailand, and Taiwan all face higher tariffs than India. Japan and South Korea are the exceptions, with marginal lower tariffs of 24% and 26% respectively. So, as India faces 27% tariff rates, Japan and Taiwan, on the other hand, Japan and South Korea, on the other hand, face a reciprocal tariff of 24 and 26% respectively, which is marginally lower than India. While some firms may relocate to the US owing to this, the current uncertainty makes fully reshoring the production line risky. Apple, for instance, benefits from manufacturing in India, which allows it to serve global markets more efficiently and avoid punitive tariffs elsewhere. So, as we all know, Apple is already manufacturing in India, which allows it to serve global markets effectively without the punitive traffic from elsewhere in the world. So, this paragraph is also very the both two paragraphs. Firstly, of apparel, that is we saw even Bangladesh is facing high tariff, Vietnam is facing high tariff, China obviously 54%, the highest, and Indonesia too, which is 32%. So India is far better placed than them, along with low skilled goods such as apparel, footwear, or others. India will have a competitive advantage in that sector. Secondly, in the next paragraph, we talk about electronics. Although competitors like Japan and South Korea have marginally low rates, yet the uncertainty in the current global trade scenario will make reshoring production a risky job. Although the political will is very strong and US aims to reshore this sector, yet India is very well positioned over here. Let's move on to the next paragraph. To be sure, countries in Latin America and Turkey face the lowest 10% baseline tariff. But among the large Asian exporters, which are the closest competitors, India has clearly fared better. For now, pharmaceuticals have been exempted, adding to India's advantage. The only sector that has been exempted from the reciprocal tariffs is pharmaceuticals, and India, mind you, is the biggest pharmaceutical exporter to the US. In short, despite a murky policy environment and likely weaker global export demand, this is a boost to the China plus one, Bangladesh plus one, and Vietnam plus one strategies that global firms are pursuing. So, if one looks closely, the impact of new tariffs will be to undermine the China centered global value chain in Asia, because the countries hit hardest are an integral part of it. So this is an important paragraph through the geopolitical scenario. Although the policy environment is quite murky and the global export demand will be weaker, the policy of global companies, that is China plus one, Vietnam plus one, and Bangladesh plus one, which means having another partner alongside China to produce your goods, having another partner alongside Vietnam and Bangladesh to produce your goods, that is China plus one, Vietnam plus one, and Bangladesh plus one, will come into play, and that will help the companies globally, and also that will undermine the China centered global value chain, and also the countries which are an integral part of it, such as Vietnam and Bangladesh. This one is an important paragraph. So the most important question is, how should India respond to it? India's priority should be to grow its global market share, even if the global trade may increase or not, regardless of whether global trade is itself expanding. To that end, India must aim to improve its competitiveness by reversing current trends. While the US may be using reciprocal tariffs as a pressure tactic to bring countries to the negotiating table, India should liberalize trade policy not reactively but as a part of long-term strategy. This reform agenda should rest on three pillars. Okay, so this paragraph is very clear. It says that in this scenario, the priority in front of Indian government should be to increase the global impact and global share in the world trade order, global market share in the world trade order, regardless of whether the global trade is increasing or not. We don't want to go behind increasing the global trade. We want to increase the share of India in the current whatever the global current trade market be. So what should India do to do that? India should increase its competitiveness not by using tariffs but by reversing the current global trade trends. US may be using reciprocal tariffs to bring other countries to the negotiating table, but India should open up, it should liberalize. This should not be done reactively, but this should be strategically done as a part of long term trade strategies. Very clear, very nuanced, perfect. And the author says that these reforms should be based on the three pillars. Firstly, tariffs should be lowered and rationalized. Right, that's true. Tariffs should be lowered and rationalized. Secondly, a uniform tariff of 5 to 10% should be levied, or secondly, a two-tier structured, a 5% on inputs and 5 to 10% on the final goods should be levied, which would simplify the system. This is something which we will have to understand in detail. This would reduce inefficiencies, delays, and rent seeking at the border. What is rent seeking at the border? We are not aware of that. We also look into that. Secondly, eliminate non-tariff barriers like quality control orders that act as disguised protectionism rather than ensuring standards. Combined with lower tariffs, this would help make India a low-cost destination for investors. So this paragraph is a technical one. We will have to understand what is a two-tier structured, a 5% tariff on input and 10% on final good. We will have to understand that. After that, let's understand it head on. Tariffs should be lowered and rationalized. True. Understood. Uniform tariff of 5 to 10% would simplify the system. True. Secondly, a two-tiered structure, that means a 5% on the inputs and a 10% on final goods, would simplify the system. Alright. So tariffs should be charged at two levels. Firstly, on input, which should be 5%. Secondly, on the final product, that should be 10%. Great. Works. It would reduce inefficiencies. So true. Delays, yeah, and rent seeking at the border. Not sure what rent seeking is, but I think that at the border, the products would have to pay some rent or some fee, service charge, whatever, as a part of entering that country. Secondly, eliminate non-tariff barriers like quality control orders that act as disguised protectionism rather than ensuring standards. So the government must have levied or must have charged quality control orders or non-tariff barriers, NTF non-tariff barriers. Instead of levying direct tariffs, government must have levied non-tariff barriers, that is barriers other than tariff, to curtail exports from the other countries. And the author says that one should completely eliminate non-tariff barriers such as quality control and others, because they don't help you in ensuring standards, but they act as a disguised way of protectionism. Yeah, combined with lower tariffs, this would act and this would make India a low-cost destination for investors. Very well. Now we understood this paragraph. Nicely done. The third pillar, he says, is a critical, that is ensure policy stability. Very important topic. Policy stability will be the key in this disturbed global trade order. India must avoid the urge to frequently revise tariffs or impose retrospective duties like those levied on Volkswagen and Samsung for decade-old imports. In today's global volatile environment, stability is a key competitive advantage. No doubt about that, stability will be a competitive advantage. Also, India should resist itself from frequently changing the tariffs, and it should completely stay away from imposing retrospective tariffs. The next paragraph, the main exception to this liberalization agenda is agriculture. Oh, so now after having spoken in favor of liberalization, the author now says what should be protected, and that is the most important thing. India being an agrarian economy, not sure, India has transformed from an agrarian economy to a service-based sector, a service-based economy. But still today, agriculture and agrarian economy contributes a large part in the GDP, preferably 54%, as I have studied last. Let's revise those data. The main exception to this liberalization agenda is agriculture, particularly the food crops. In the current geopolitical climate, India must maintain the domestic production to ensure food security. Trade policy here requires more caution. Still, there is scope to lower tariffs on non-food crops. Those are not widely consumed in India, such as soybean and maize, meant for poultry feed, which are major US exports. So, along with the protectionism or the protection for agricultural sector, the author also says that such food crops which are not generally meant for Indian households or for the Indian market but are to be exported primarily to the US, such as maize and soybean, which will be used for poultry feeds, that should be liberalized and that should be exempted from the tariffs. Next, counterintuitive as it may seem, the winners in this uncertain trade landscape will not be those who raise barriers, but those who offer predictability and openness. What a point! The winners in this uncertain trade landscape will not be those who raise barriers, but those who prefer predictability and openness. Global firms will seek production hubs and explore and export platforms that are cost effective, policy stable, and can provide labor and capital at scale, and are insulated from retaliatory action. India can and should be that safe haven. The gist or the go forward, the action plan is this. The winners of this trade war will not be the ones who will increase their trade barriers, but it will be those who will be stable with their policies and will liberalize and open up with their economies. Predictability and openness. Because global firms will seek mainly things such as fixed rate of tariff, secondly, large labor at scale with low human investment or low capital investment, that should be capital and cost effective, that should be policy stable, can provide labor at large scale and also capital at scale. And the most important, that these should be protected from retaliatory action, or they should not be protected, I would say they should be insulated from retaliatory action. India can and India should be such a safe haven. This means resisting protectionism and doubling down on trade reforms. This means resisting protectionism and doubling down on trade reforms. This will not only secure India's place in shifting supply chain, but also send a strong signal to the investors that India is open for business regardless what other countries do. Typical Bania mindset that whatever be the global scenario, India is open for business, India means business, and we are welcoming you with both our hands in the air. Thanks, man.